Hello and welcome. For around 16 years, if you wanted to play the latest and greatest Nintendo games on the go, you were buying a portable system with the letters D and S in it. Whether it's the original DS or the new 2DS XL, you were guaranteed top quality Nintendo fun. And then now that Nintendo's focus has moved on to the dedicated portable hybrid handheld called the Switch, I feel it's a good time as any to take a look back at Nintendo's long lineup of DS systems to see which ones were good, which ones were not as good, and which ones are still worth getting today. Right after a message from this video's sponsor. Today's video is sponsored by 16-Bit Store. If you're looking for a one-stop shop for a replacement stylus for your Nintendo DS and 3DS systems, why not visit the 16-Bit Store? We've designed and 3D printed our own styluses from the original Nintendo DS all the way to the new Nintendo 3DS. So if you're in the market for a replacement stylus, why not visit the 16-Bit Store today? And if you use offer code 16BitReview on Etsy, you'll get 15% off your order when you buy 2 items or more. We begin this little trip into the past with the Nintendo DS and DS Lite. Both systems are basically identical in terms of features, operating systems, and game compatibility, with the most notable feature of the original DS models is that it's the only DS that's compatible with Game Boy Advance games. However, if you were looking to go and buy yourself an original DS, do yourself a favor and just get yourself a DS Lite. The DS Lite is a smaller, lighter portable system with a much better display that's more robust in certain areas, and due to its extreme popularity, it's easy to find pretty much anywhere at what can be argued is a good price for a system as popular as it. Though, if I had to personally pick my favorite original DS, I do have to say my preference is for the original. There's just something about it that's just nostalgic using the original DS. It feels good in my hands. Though, even I have to admit, there are downsides to using it. The screen is dark and terrible to use in any condition that isn't pitch black. If you don't have a spare Game Boy Advance game to shove into the lower slot, the plot itself will snap, and its stylus is so tiny that it was extremely easy to lose. And from personal experience, the system is quite fragile, despite how bulky and durable it does feel, and the hinge is almost guaranteed to snap if you're not careful. Meanwhile, the DS Lite offers all the same functionalities as the original with none of the drawbacks. The Game Boy Advance slot has been reinforced, and the stylus is a lot bigger and easier to keep track of. But if you're not into transferring Pokemon from the Game Boy Advance games to the DS ones, or are into playing Game Boy Advance games at night with headphones, there's really no point in getting an original DS because the Nintendo 3DS offers the same functionality, but with more games compatible at not much more of a price. But with that said, you cannot deny the availability and the affordability of this system. And in my view, it is a great entry point, especially if you've never owned a DS before. However, the same things cannot be said about the Nintendo DSi or the Nintendo DSi XL. Back in the day, the DSi would have been a natural upgrade for the DS for those who wanted more out of their consoles. The DSi was premium with a much nicer build quality, a greater emphasis on internet connectivity. That's where the I in the DSi comes from. And back in the day, it would have been great. It had a web browser that was usable. It could connect to Wi-Fi that wasn't from the Stone Age, with games that actually supported it. And with the new addition of an SD card, you could even buy and download games from this newfangled internet's DSiWare shop. The issue with this entire package nowadays is that all the new additions don't work. The internet browser is so outdated that it's not usable. The DSiWare store closed back in 2017, and the simple fact that there's just no Game Boy Advance slot to be found anywhere on the system means that it has less functionality now than the original DS. But that's not to say that the DSi isn't completely useless, especially because of its apparent uselessness. There isn't much of a demand for the system, and as a result, this is one of the easier systems to find and buy online nowadays. And if you are into a bit of tinkering and have a computer that you don't mind using to download some questionable code, the DSi is an extremely easy to modify system. And with the addition of emulators, the DSi can easily play more games than the DS ever could dream of. Plus, this was the first DS system to have an XL variant, so this is the cheapest way to play DS games if you have bad eyesight. However, if you do want usable internet functionalities or just want to play even more games, you can always spend just a little more and get yourself a Nintendo 3DS console. The 3DS is the natural evolution of the DSi, with a lot of the DSi's features coming back to the 3DS as improvements, and are still relatively usable at the time of filming. But even if functionality like the browser or the Nintendo eShop were to just disappear tomorrow, the 3DS line of systems is not just compatible with DS and DSiWare titles, but it's also compatible with the brand new 3DS games. And you'll be spoiled for choice for the sheer amount of games that you can just play on this system. The 3DS really is the best of all worlds in terms of games, and arguably one of the best portable gaming consoles that the world has ever seen. But I can't say the same thing about every console's build quality, as some 3DSs are built better than others. The original 3DS feels slightly better than the DSi and could probably survive a knock or two, but I'm going to be honest, it doesn't feel that premium in comparison to the DSi's. If you're looking for robust, I would highly advise the Nintendo 2DS. It's the most robust DS I've personally used, and I've seen this thing survive quite a bit of abuse, though I personally don't like the way it feels. But when it comes to the Nintendo 3DS XL, what can I say other than it just doesn't feel good? It's solid in construction, but somehow it just feels plasticky and mushy and just overall cheap. Out of the three systems, the Nintendo 2DS and 3DS from a financials perspective are the best value, and in my view are probably your best bet to get if you want to play 3DS games. But with how much extra the 3DS XL costs, you might as well just save up a little more and get yourself the next lineup of Nintendo 3DS systems. Which leads us to the last generation of DS systems. Nintendo was going to bring out their best and most powerful consoles at the end of the 3DS's life, and they did deliver. But they couldn't deliver on the name because they called the series the new 3DS systems. This included the new Nintendo 3DS, the new Nintendo 3DS XL, and the new Nintendo 2DS XL. The new 3DSs are the DSi equivalent to the Nintendo 3DS. They are more powerful than the original systems, they offer their own lineup of exclusive games, but unlike the DSi, the exclusive games that were coming out for the 3DS is something that you would probably actually consider buying. The new DSs are also built to a beautiful quality. I love the way the new 3DS and the new 3DS XL feels. They are just nice to use in the hands. They're solid in construction and honestly are the best DS systems that I have ever used. It's a shame then that the same cannot be said for the new 2DS XL. I bought this system with the expectation that it was going to be similar to the 2DS. A system that was so robust that you could hand this freely off to a 7-year-old, know that when they give it back to you, that you can just brush off the gravel, dirt, sand, and cracker crumbs that they try to shove into it, and know that it will still work. The new 2DS though doesn't feel the same. In fact, it feels just cheap. It feels light and hollow, almost like one of those dollar store electronic Sudoku games that you get at a Happy Meal prize packs. It feels terrible in the hands. I want to give this thing some praise. I mean, I feel like it's made out of the same plastics as a 3DS XL, but somehow it just doesn't feel as solid. Which is a shame because the new 2DS XL is probably one of the better systems that Nintendo has offered and was sold at a reasonable price when it was new. In fact, the entire new DS line is fantastic and the best the DS has to offer. Sure, it's missing the Game Boy Advance compatibility, but it makes up for it in spades with not just a better web browser, with video streaming, but also with more games on both physical cartridge and available from the eShop with backwards compatibility or emulation from the original Game Boy, Game Boy Color, Game Gear, NES, Super Nintendo, and probably more that I've completely forgotten about just because of just how compatible this one console is. Now, if I had to recommend any of the new DS line of consoles, I would highly recommend the new 3DS. But due to their limited distribution here in North America, they are sadly quite hard to find nowadays. If you're looking for one, you are better off looking to get yourself the new 3DS XL. Not only because the system is cheaper, but also because it has a bigger display, which the missus says she likes a lot. So that was my opinion on every DS model which Nintendo has ever made. And honestly, in its own unique way, every DS line is still worth getting today. The original, for instance, is a cheap game console with a large library of games and a great entry point into older Nintendo games with its Game Boy Advance compatibility. The DSi is a perfect entry-level modding system if you're willing and able to tinker. The Nintendo 3DS is a perfect all-around system, and the new 3DS is truly the ultimate DS experience if you're willing to pay the costs. Personally, I enjoy them all so much that I'm probably going to hold on to one DS system from every lineup, because there is a use for each one of them in my little collection. But anyways, hope you found this video helpful. I hope you have yourself a good day, and as always, take care.